The truth is, many of the people that share this sort of rhetoric and the beliefs that behind it are well organized and well funded. So last night we had a terrible incident occur, and we talked about it a little on stream, where two Jewish folks were walking out of some Jewish center and they were shot and killed. More details are coming out about the killer today, including video of the immediate aftermath where he's shouting "Free Palestine, Free Palestine." It seemed evident last night that most likely with slogans like that, this was someone that would identify with the political left, though we weren't certain of it. Oftentimes, it's best to wait about 24 hours before you try to make any judgments on these sorts of things. And I will say this with a caveat as well: new information could always come to light. But as it stands today, with the information we receive, with all of the circumstantial evidence that you could see surrounding it, along with information that's directly coming from law enforcement and video evidence that we could see, this does appear to be a radical leftist that was killing Jewish people and what they thought might be official Jewish diplomats or something of that effect because they believe in the rhetoric that you hear from so many that Israel is committing a genocide. But it's not just that. That's a surface level look at this. In reality, it is a much more insidious sort of worldview that's responsible for this. And that is a worldview that comes down to what I like to call cultural Marxism, which is that everyone is broken into infinite amounts of categories based on all sorts of things: your age, your race, your religion, your country of origin, your wealth. And those groups are made up of oppressors and oppressed. And if you're a member of that oppressed group or you're sticking up for members of those oppressed groups, then anything is on the table. It shouldn't be surprising that the very people that claimed that Donald Trump is a Nazi and Joe Biden, who was the president, who ran on saying the reason I ran was basically Donald Trump said that Nazis could be good people. It's always been troubling when you think of what the logical extension to that would be. I gave two examples last night, two streamers that I myself have interacted with. One is Vosh, another is someone who's seen as far more sensible in Lonerbox. Vosh, I did a whole episode and then a debate on Vosh's rhetoric where there was a Patriot Prayer rally in Portland, Oregon. After that rally, one of the people that was marching with Patriot Prayer, which was a nonviolent protest, by the way, was approached by a member of Antifa and murdered in cold blood. Vosh, months later, said that he envisioned a world where, quote, we could take pot shots out of windows at people like in Patriot Prayer. In other words, he wants a world where lefties could shoot at peaceful right-wing protesters. Why? Because they're awful. That's why. When he said this, he was actually talking with another left-wing streamer, and he started to justify his worldview by saying things like, well, wouldn't we have stopped Hitler before he came to power? Had you known, wouldn't you stop him? Then he talked about things like the trans genocide that was occurring. Now, the logical extrapolation from all of this, saying you wish that we could shoot at right wingers that are protesting, we should have stopped Hitler before he came to power because he committed genocide. Oh, right wingers are committing a genocide right now against trans people. You can understand why unhinged people that are listening to him would say, perhaps that's telling me that the best thing I could do is take matters into my own hands. After the assassination attempt in Butler, the first assassination attempt of Trump here last year, you had large streamer Destiny that was out there sort of making dog whistles to the fact that maybe Trump should have been taken out. I forgive everything he's saying. It was just anger, jokes, whatever. Until his co-host at the time, Pisco, asked him point blank on a stream, be honest, did you want that bullet to kill Trump? Destiny first says, I don't know what I could say because of terms of service. Then he pauses and he says, I don't know, but I'll say this. The worst thing that could have happened was that bullet not killing Trump. This didn't sound like a joke to me. It didn't sound like he was refusing to answer the question because it was not someone he respected. After all, this was his co-host that he did show with. Of course, people sent me links to Destiny's Reddit because I don't really use Reddit. And you had all sorts of people in his Reddit, probably younger people, saying things like, well, we tried to take Donald Trump out the legitimate way at the ballot box, and we tried to take him out using the law. But the Supreme Court, and they parroted Destiny's rhetoric on this, basically made Trump God Emperor above the law. So now the tactics must change. Now you might say, well, Vosh, Destiny, they're a bit unhinged. Enter Lonerbox, who's seen as more of a benign, to me, seems more of a calm, rational streamer, even if I disagree with his politics. He tweets out Well, at what point would we have stopped Hitler? Right after the assassination of Trump. I was shocked. I was like, really? This is what you're going to do? This is what you're going to say now? He told me to call into his show. I did. His claim was, no, I was just asking that question about when we should have stopped Hitler. It had nothing to do with the assassination that was the news right then of Trump. Nope, it was just a totally disconnected to anything going on in the world at that time question, which is an obvious lie. We'll talk about it later, but polling shows that 55.2% of people left of center said that they would strongly or partially justify the murder of Donald Trump. 55.2% of lefties said that. So is any surprise? Then, of course, you could see the left-wing reaction after Luigi Mangione killed the United Healthcare CEO. You had Taylor Lorenz, formerly of, where was she? The Washington Post, giving glowing interviews about Luigi. She, in turn, is getting interviewed by other mainstream members of the press, yucking it up. I said at the time, are you sure this is the direction that we're going to go down? Because once you say my opponents, those that disagree with me, are morally evil, and I'm justified in doing whatever I can to stop that evil, there's a lot of people out there that feel that they have nothing left to lose. And so if you could give them a way in their mind to be moral heroes, they're going to take it. There are other examples of left-wing violence that we could see just recently from like a month. In my state of Pennsylvania, a radical left-winger firebombed our Democratic governor's mansion with him and his wife inside sleeping, Josh Shapiro. I didn't talk about the story, but just last week, we saw a person who seemed to identify as a, quote, anti-natalist who wants to stop procreation, and a rabid left-winger suicide bomb a clinic. Now we have this shooting that occurs against these Jewish people. Now, am I saying that these people that say that they're anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-Trump, should they be censored online? No, that's not what I'm saying. Should they be charged with inciting violence? I'm not saying that at all. Evidence seems to suggest that people within the Biden administration were at least giving money to NGOs and other groups that were pressuring social media to censor stories they didn't like, many times in the name of public safety or stopping violence. My question is, why shouldn't that same standard apply here? Now, make no mistake about it, they're going to push for it. They are. Because unfortunately, if there's one group of people that there's institutional support and pressure that comes from that you're not allowed to criticize, it's Israel. So you're going to see push from Congress people that are going to say, we need to censor people online that say Israel's committing a genocide. Let me say as clearly as I can, I am against that. I think that is outrageous. I don't give a shit if you can definitively prove that Israel is not committing a genocide. You should be allowed to say that. But for those on the left and those that vote Democrat that had no problem when people like me were getting censored on platforms like YouTube or Twitter or Facebook for stories surrounding COVID, for stories surrounding 2020 election, why shouldn't they be held to the same standard that they wished upon me? And for the people that tried to use this as a political axe, that every time there's someone that could be identified as a right-winger that commits an act of violence, they say right-wing rhetoric is responsible for it, right-wing stochastic terrorism. Why shouldn't they be held to the same standard that they've employed? Why is it that when left-wingers go out and do some insane violent stuff, and I just listed attack on Josh Shapiro's mansion, attack on that fertility clinic, attack now killing these two people, we had the Luigi Mangione killing of the United Healthcare CEO. Why don't we have those similar claims coming from institutions such as the mainstream media? So let's get into some of the specifics on this. First, let's talk a little more about this shooting last night. Elias Rodriguez, the alleged suspect who murdered 2 staff members in an Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., is a far-left activist in Chicago who is a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a group that we have well documented for a year now. I'll take you back to September 2024, leading up to the election, where I encountered the PSL protesting outside a Kamala Harris rally in Atlanta. As you can see, the leader of the organized PSL and I bumped heads. This is my first look into this ideology.
You're foolish.
Well, hey,
this is
listen.
Not how you interview, by the way. You're
Well, you're an activist.
How do you negotiate a ceasefire if you keep killing the leaders?
Well, I agree here. How do you negotiate a ceasefire with a terrorist group? How do
So,
you?
so
How
are
do
you
you?
saying that there's just no solution to the issue and just
No,
keep doing it?
I think there's a
So
solution,
what,
but
what's the solution?
the solution can be with Hamas. Can we agree on that at least here?
Yeah, so how? But you're saying that
No,
that's
no,
the
no.
only
First, can
solution.
we agree on that?
I
No,
mean,
we can agree on that. I want to respond to this
Yeah.
because
And first of all, what does your shirt say?
it says Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm an organizer with the
Liberation.
PSL.
Okay. Liberation for what?
Liberation for all oppressed nations and all nations fighting against U.S. imperialism. Let me answer the
So
question.
one second.
Now, just to be clear, that's what I wanted to show you out of this. This is not just something that's against Israel. The same sort of logic that to these people that say, well, Israel are the oppressors, the United States itself is considered the exact same. They're considered the oppressors as well. So make no mistake about it. When you hear them prescribing all of the things that's justified to do to Israel, they absolutely feel the same way about the United States. Make no mistake about it. Again, this is David Cott. That's his thread. He says the PSL, like many other left organizations, are very well funded. Pictured you can see our yellow vested marshals. Very well organized as well. Every single thing that I see with Soros paid organizations happens when I encounter the PSL. Next, you'll see my encounter with them at the May Day March. Here you can see the Party for Socialism Liberation take part in the May Day March. Notice the girl in the orange vest, same one I encountered in September of 2024. Once already exposed, I usually start to confront them. As you can see, PSL and their members aren't able to condemn Hamas. Tactics used to cover up journalists from capturing PSL chants. Let's hear some of the chants if we can.
Is there a problem?
Yeah, you're doxing people.
Why am I doxing people?
I've heard from other people that you're doxing people.
Like what?
Like taking pictures of people's faces and posting them online.
I'm posting their posters.
Okay.
And they're in public space, right?
Yeah, I'm in public space too.
I know. So
Nice.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, have fun.
Thanks. Are you gonna? I know this is your tactic. Are you gonna stay with me now?
We love Zionists.
Now, you saw a lot of this with Antifa as well, and it's something I talked about a lot with Antifa. Every time you would see violence, well, not every time, but a lot of times you would see violence when there were like Antifa rallies, riots, etc. You would see these people that would have black umbrellas, and they would instantly shield the people committing the violence with these black umbrellas to prevent them from being seen. Or they would shout into people recording to prevent the microphones from picking up what they were saying. Now, if you couldn't hear, what they were chanting here was things such as, from Mexico to Palestine, border walls are all a crime.
Palestine! From Mexico to Palestine! Border walls are all a crime! From Mexico to Palestine! Border walls are all a crime! From Mexico!
No peace, no peace.
Sanders have to go!
Hey, oh, detention centers have got to go.
In past socialist revolutions is that a lot of them end up being a violent revolution. What is the idea here? A non-violent or violent revolution?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
I would say, like, personally, I would love if the revolution could be nonviolent.
Yeah, yeah.
The truth is that, so like here, let's sketch out what could happen. So
Yeah.
a general strike that turns into a revolution. Workers occupy their factories. They put their hands on the machines. They say, capitalist, this is not yours anymore.
Yeah.
We own this. We control this. You get none of the value we create.
Yeah, yeah.
What do the capitalists do? They send in armed thugs
Yeah.
to slaughter the workers in that situation. So the workers need to defend themselves. And the truth is that
Now I
when
see you have to have it.
Right, when
essentially-
push comes to shove, to
Makes
defend
sense.
yourself against violence takes violence.
Makes sense.
So they're allowed to use violence because when they steal all of the equipment, the factories, etc., then people will try to take it back. And so it's defensive violence at that point to use the violence. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in the PSL is guilty of wanting to use violence or of doing things what Rodriguez is for what it's worth. They have released, I will show you this, they have released a statement suggesting that Rodriguez was not a member of them. It says, we reject any attempt to associate the PSL with the DC shooting. Elias Rodriguez is not a member of the PSL. He had a brief association with one branch of the PSL that ended in 2017. We know of no contact with him over 7 years. We have nothing to do with this shooting and do not support it. At least they're coming out and saying that. But you can see Rodriguez was connected to this organization. And now, of course, for the bad publicity, they're going to say, oh, no. The truth is, many of the people that share this sort of rhetoric and the beliefs that behind it are well organized and well funded. Why is it when lefties chant things, whether it be Antifa or BLM, pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon, detention centers have got to go, all sorts of other things, why is it that we never take that at face value? Kill the Boers. Nah, they don't really mean kill the Boers. They don't mean kill the white farmers. It's actually a very nuanced discussion. You can't believe them. But boy, they know when Trump says something like, hey, get out there and fight like hell. Even when he says do so peacefully, go march peacefully, they know deep down he's calling for violence. They know it. They just know it. How is that? Here's some of the charges, just in case you're wondering. Now, I don't care what you think of Israel. I myself have criticized Israel quite heavily. I think they have too much influence on the United States politics. I think that it's absurd that there's such a push to sort of censor anything critical of Israel. And I think that this will unfortunately be used by people in places like AIPAC to push for more censorship against people that want to criticize Israel. And I'm vehemently against it. However, that doesn't mean that I can't point out the radical nature of so many of the left-wingers and how the same rhetoric they want to use against Israel because they're oppressors will then be inserted for white people or men or Christians or capitalists like business owners, landlords, or the United States of America. You see? But even if you are critical of Israel, which there's no problem with, no shame, it's clear that actions like this are incredibly heinous and unjustified. Let's hear a little of the details of exactly how this went down. Once Rodriguez walked past the decedents and two witnesses, he turned to face their backs and brandished his firearm from the area of his waistband. Rodriguez is captured on video extending both his arms in the direction of the decedents and firing several times, as indicated by the muzzle flashes. Once the decedents fell to the ground, Rodriguez is captured on video advancing closer to the decedents, leaning over with them with his arms extended and firing several more times. As decedent one attempted to crawl away, that's the woman, by the way, he followed behind her and fired again. After a brief moment, Rodriguez appeared to reload his firearm. At the same time, decedent one sat up. Once he reloaded, he fired several times at her again. So the moral of the story today is terrible shooting. Feel bad for the victims, obviously, and their families first and foremost. Not surprised, given what we've seen with the Luigi Mangione thing, with the rhetoric around the assassination of Trump, that it's not just a few fringe people, but there are mainstream movements in the Democratic Party and on the left that celebrate these sorts of things.